Jeff, you there?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm well. I'm well, my friend. A lot is happening. It's a busy time
Too
uh,
much.
for all things politics. Jeff, I want to go right into it, and it's Friday, 2 p.m. I want you to give me a sort of lightning round of the week's comings and goings and your thoughts. That fair?
Yeah, let's go. This was really a crazy week. President Trump was inaugurated, and that's national news by itself. But there was a really local angle in that our mayor Eric Adams found himself attending that inauguration. He got a call in the middle of the night, he says, and hightailed it to D.C. at 3 a.m. And was there at the inauguration, though he was in the overflow room of the inauguration, which was held indoors. And this caused just a huge stir in the city's political landscape because, as we know, Mayor Adams is facing a 5-count federal indictment. And President Trump has signaled that he sympathizes with the mayor, believes he's also a victim of prosecutors who are run amok, and has signaled that he could pardon the mayor. So this comes after Mayor Adams, went to Florida the week before to meet with President Trump as well. And so what we saw in New York City was a response to that from a lot of other politicians who were questioning whether the mayor was going to the inauguration and meeting with President Trump for his own ends, or whether he was doing it on behalf of the largest city in the country. And that remains one of the biggest questions. And the mayor continues to come under attack for his stance, uh, responding to some of President Trump's early actions around immigration, his efforts to end birthright citizenship, pulling out of the Paris Accords, for example. After he got back from D.C., the mayor had nothing to say about those things, uh, all issues that affect New Yorkers.
Jeff, I have this question. I'm going to pose this question, and I want your thoughts and your analysis on it. DEI, immigration, several of your colleagues have put out, the city put out a sort of video of the mayor at a BAM event, which he missed this year, uh, taking shots at President Trump. There's some comments were made in the past by the mayor about Tucker Carlson, which have now changed. I'm thinking IEs, I'm thinking about attack ads in the upcoming race. But when you think about his base of support, and when you think about Central Brooklyn, heavily immigrant, heavily West Indian, heavily all things, right? And when you think about the
Right.
attacks on birthright citizenship, when you think about DEI, which is a fancy way of saying affirmative action, and you're talking about the second African American mayor and what that means, right? What does that mean? Long term, how problematic is it for the core base of support, Southeast Queens and areas where he's traditionally done well in terms of voters, South Bronx, Northern Manhattan, the sort of outer borough pockets or the largely minority communities. Can he walk this back?
I don't know yet, but it is a risky strategy. There's been a lot made of the fact that Trump did better in New York City than his 2016 election, but still, vast numbers of New Yorkers do not support President Trump or his policies. As you said, this is a city of immigrants. Um, there are 400,000 undocumented immigrants here, probably more. They're having children. What's going to happen? Are their children going to be U.S. citizens? Is the health department going to issue birth certificates? There are a lot of people feeling unsure of where the mayor stands on these issues. He was asked about it this week, and he said, there's no need for me to criticize President Trump. I have a direct line to him, and I will air my disagreements with him. The problem is that leaves it open to interpretation on where he stands. What is he talking about with the president in those private conversations? the chaos that would be caused if, birthright citizenship was ended in the city would be amazing. And I think one thing to look at on whether this might affect him, well, I think there's two things to think about. One, the mayor is facing a very serious indictment that could land him serious jail time. So he's doing everything possible. He has not ruled out accepting a pardon from President Trump. He said his lawyer, he believes he's been wrongly charged, and his lawyer will pursue every path to justice. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you look at someone like Al Sharpton, who was very concerned when Mayor Adams skipped two Martin Luther King Jr. Day events to attend the inauguration at the very last minute. Reverend Sharpton said it raised eyebrows. You also had the Speaker of the City Council, Adrienne Adams, who, took a shot at the mayor and said, we have leaders that should be here with us today. She said this at the BAM event celebrating Martin Luther King. Instead, they're in D.C. celebrating, I think she called him Felon 47, I believe. So when you look at those constituencies, that's certainly his base. Reverend Sharpton, the people that go to National Action Network, the people in Southeast Queens and Adrienne Adams district, all a strong part of his base. Those people stand to be potentially turned off by him cozying up to Donald Trump. And I think there's an even bigger risk if we continue to see, we're hearing all kinds of reports about, ICE going into places. What happens when we have the video of ICE going into public school and, dragging out a parent or a teacher or a student? That sort of association with President Trump is going to be very difficult for him to reckon with in a Democratic primary.
Jeff, you wrote a piece on the former Governor Cuomo and Carl McCall and David Patterson, and interesting quotes throughout. And as you've seen, State Senator Zona Myrie, a lot of the attacks have pivoted to now former Governor Cuomo, because the most recent polling shows that he is leading. He hasn't declared, but he's leading in pretty much every poll I've seen. And he's made significant inroads in the African American community in terms of the polls, that the most recent polling. With that said, do you think that there's potential that the focus shifts from Mayor Adams based on the different issues that he's currently working through, and the pylon? Everyone just begins to pile on former Governor Cuomo, from the nursing home deaths to right. What Zelner Myrie you could potentially call it, that saying that he's pandering, right, when he's done very little to nothing for their community. What are your thoughts on how everything's shifting in terms of the attacks? Because as you know, in this business, the minute people start attacking you, it's a sign that you're relevant, and that there's fear.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear that you're right. The polling shows that Governor Cuomo would be a front runner in the race, is a front runner in this race right now. He hasn't even fully indicated that he's running, although there are numerous indications that he is preparing a run. Many of my sources think it is highly likely that he will enter the mayor's race. And you're right. He is a threat, right? So in New York City, to win mayor, you need some Black support from Black voters. And that was the article we wrote, which talked about Governor Cuomo's sort of history with Black politicians. There was the sort of concern that he pushed Carl McCall aside, or tried to push him aside back when McCall was running for governor. There was a concern around Governor Patterson, when Governor Patterson, took over after Governor Spitzer wanted a full term of his own. Ended up not getting it. Most of the political establishment believes, Governor Cuomo was involved in pushing him aside so that he could run for governor. And so his impact would be immediate. He has money in his campaign from the state, some of which he'll be able to transfer over. He has nearly universal name recognition. I think that's the problem that we're seeing in this mayor's race. You have candidates like Zelno Myrie, who's state senator from Brooklyn, a very astute politician, has passed lots of policies and, has ideas, great ideas for the city, just is not known. People don't know who he is. So he comes into the race with a bunch of advantages: name recognition, money. But you're right, he also has a long history, which people will begin to examine. And Senator Myrie, at a debate earlier this week, really called Andrew Cuomo out by name. He said, the governor was responsible for helping to create the Independent Democratic Conference, which for years really kept Democrats from controlling the legislature and hindered policies that Zellner said would have helped Black and brown people, everything from education to gun control. So Cuomo's coming in with tremendous advantages, but it's also clear that he would be a target the moment he declares. He's already a target. Everyone from Brad Lander to Scott Stringer has been criticizing the governor's record on everything from nursing care to housing to congestion pricing. Right? He signed the law, congestion pricing law. So he has tremendous benefits and also tremendous liabilities.
The other question I have, Jeff, what do you attribute the so all the polls that I've seen so far have uh, one thing in common. Anyone that seems to have one, obviously name recognition doesn't hurt, but also the managerial thing seems to be resonating with people. Meaning, I've seen numerous polls that have Stringer at or near the top. The other person that is polling very well is State Senator Jessica Ramos.
Right.
Weigh in on that.
Yeah. Well, I I think the issue of
Meaning
managing this.
someone like Brad Lander, who's currently in office and is a
Right.
citywide elected official. Again, it's extremely early, in all fairness to the city comptroller, but it's impressive or telling that this early on, someone who hasn't been in office recently, someone who had his own issues, right? The last Glasgow round meeting, a Stringer,
Right.
obviously State Senator Ramos benefits from being the only woman and the only Latina. Not that she is, because, and I'm only saying only because of the surname. It's very difficult to decipher, right? If you're in the poll, if you're in the voting booth, I'm not saying that Senator Myrie is not Latino. I'm saying that the surname helps her, right? It helps
Right.
identify her as Latina.
Right. Yeah. I think the issue of managing the city was going to be an issue heading into this election. Even if we weren't dealing with all these questions around the mayor and his indictment. Even before his indictment, the mayor was not polling well. A lot of New Yorkers were not happy with how things were going in the city. I think Mayor Adams does have some accomplishments. He started trash containerization, which a lot of mayors have tried and wanted to do but did not accomplish. So he has put the city on the road to doing that. Passed a serious zoning plan that would help build approximately 80,000 units. We know affordable housing and affordability is a major issue in the city. Crime shootings are down, even though they have not necessarily rebounded. Crime hasn't rebounded to the levels before the pandemic. Crime has receded a bit. So there are people that worry about what happens when they get on the train. Right? You have these high-profile incidents of mentally ill people pushing people, attacking people on the train, and of course we know not all mentally ill people are violent, but those incidents lend to a sort of atmosphere of people concerned about how the city's being run. Are they safe? Are the services being delivered? So that was going to be a line of attack from Mayor Adams' opponents at the get-go. And then you bring in someone like Governor Cuomo, who I think that's going to be his argument, right? He's because I think of the competition for Black votes, I could see him, not really attacking the mayor in that way. Instead, playing up the idea that he is what New York City needs right now, which is a manager. He can point to various legislative accomplishments, things he's done with LaGuardia and the Kosciuszko Bridge and other major projects that he helped shepherd through. And I think that will be his strongest argument coming in. You also see Scott Stringer pursuing that line, saying that, look, I will be ready on day one to manage the city. I'm a controller. I know how to pull the levers of power. I know how the city works. The city's not being run well, and I'm the person that can solve that. So the issue of managing the city is there. It is, sometimes it gets obscured by the sort of more flashy political issues of, where will Eric get a pardon and, what's his relationship to Trump. But, there is a very real issue about whether New York City voters are happy about how the city is being run.
Jeff, Tom Allen wrote a piece today about a hypothetical where Police Commissioner Jesse Tisch runs. What are your thoughts on that?
I think she has made a bit of a splash. She's someone, as he pointed out in his piece, comes from an incredibly wealthy family, but also has this history of working in city government, right? She worked her way up in the police department and, became sanitation commissioner. So it's not like, she just immediately became police commissioner. And upon becoming police commissioner, she really inherited a mess. She's the fourth police commissioner that Mayor Adams has had. And the police department had a lot of issues. The previous commissioner had resigned after he, received a subpoena, I believe. And, the previous police commissioner had left because the first Black woman felt that, she didn't have control over the department. Mayor Adams was elected on the idea that he was a former police officer and that law enforcement would be under control. But what she inherited was a police department that had a lot of issues. You had Phil Banks, who was the deputy mayor for public safety, who really helped to oversee the department, resigned. And so I think the idea, people are looking for someone who can bring a sort of level of managerial competence. And that's what you hear about her, right? You hear what she's done with sanitation, when it comes to that containerization effort, she was working with the mayor to move that forward quickly. So yeah, it's interesting at this point. We have several candidates in the race. You have even a candidate who hasn't entered the race, who's drawing a lot of attention. It just feels like so unsettled. We don't know what's going to happen at this point. I have no indication that she's going to actually run at this point, but it's not far-fetched to see at some point in the future a candidate from Jessica Tisch.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, we're going to see a lot happening. The petitioning starts in a handful of weeks. That will also shake things up, meaning people have to commit to something fairly soon. So TBD, but that's another deadline in terms of
Right,
things that need to happen in order for you to pursue this, or whoever decides to either throw their hat in the ring.
right.
How's the new year been to Governor Hochul? The polling hasn't been great, which has created a lane for her to be attacked by, most prominently Congressmember Richie Torres. But the most recent budget announcement she's made sort of play to all sides: 1 billion for renewable energy, more cops, uh, you know, uh, allocations for mental health, and so it's got a lot there in terms of what are the issues people are concerned about. She came out forcefully with Attorney General Tish James on birthright and citizen and the 14th Amendment. What are your thoughts so far on how the year has begun for Governor Hochul?
Yeah, she is also, struggling in the polls, although her numbers seem to have hit rock bottom and are beginning to rebound. I think the lesson she's taken from, our recent presidential election is that New Yorkers are worried about affordability. I think that really is going to be the buzzword and the buzz phrase in our mayor's race. Even in the governor's race in 26, I think affordability is going to be an issue, whether New Yorkers can afford to live here, the cost of living, the cost of childcare, also lifestyle, the train, the subway, are the subways working properly? Can I get around? Will I ever be able to afford a home in New York, and particularly New York City. So the governor, I think, has wisely focused her agenda on that issue, and you see her doing several things around sending money back to taxpayers. You know, taxpayers could get about $500 under a plan, she announced. And so I think her focus to sort of ward off these threats from Richie Torres. Even more threatening, though, is, Lawler, who is a Republican congressman, who has also signaled that he could potentially run. And given the gains that President Trump and Republicans have made in the state, could be a serious threat. So what we see right now, Kathy Hochul is really sort of girding herself up for what looks to be potentially a difficult primary. I wrote a story not long ago about her lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado, who's also making a lot of noise, sort of branching out on his own and, starting his own PAC and trying to help candidates get elected. So this is certainly going to be a difficult maze for her to navigate as she heads towards her own reelection. She has wisely said that affordability is going to be the issue she stakes a lot of claim on, and you see that in the initial, $252 billion budget that she unveiled.
Jeff, reporters like yourself, especially the paper of record, the New York Times, you get everything from polls to spin to Oppo to name it. You get it. Intel. You get it all. If you were to, based on all you've received and read and heard, and does Governor Cuomo run for mayor? Make a prediction.
Well, I don't like to make those predictions because I don't think that's my place. But I mean, what I would tell you is that my reporting, I don't have to make a prediction. I can tell you that my reporting shows that he is making moves to run for mayor. And, people close to him, people in the political establishment, even Mayor Adams, political folks. You're right. I do talk to everyone. Everyone seems to believe that it is likely, highly likely, that he will enter the mayor's race. It's a situation where, this is a comeback for him, where this may be his last shot at a comeback. And the situation seems to be lining up well for him. You have a mayor who was struggling in the polls beforehand, who's under indictment. He is, loved in the city. That Cuomo name carrying over from his father, Mario Cuomo. He has that name recognition, and he does have a history of accomplishments. All things that are why he is leading in many of the polls. Again, he does have these issues that he's going to have to reckon with. How he handled nursing homes during the pandemic. What is his record with Black voters? Has he delivered for Black voters, even though he's gotten consistent support from them? And issues with women, the sexual harassment charges, the investigation by Tish James. Those are very serious issues. And because of his long record, there's going to be a line of people who are willing to talk about it. But, from what it looks at this point like he will be a candidate. Now, that could change, right? Things happen. Who knows what happens if Mayor Adams gets pardoned and he continues to move forward with the campaign. So those are considerations that are going to have to be made. But at this point, it's looking strongly as if he will be a candidate.
The other thing I would also add to Mayor Adams, the institutional support is still there.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
No one has jumped ship. Unions. He still raised a good amount of money. That's real estate. The people that make the decisions. At the end of the day, the power brokers are still with the mayor.
You're right. Big business is still backing him.
Real estate, yes.
Labor unions. There haven't been major defections from labor unions. He has some problems, though. He was denied matching funds because his indictment involved some issues with straw donors and foreign nationals, funneling money into his campaign. So he did raise his fundraising rebounded recently. He raised $250,000, but normally that would be matched, and that would be potentially up to $1 million. Now it's just $250,000. The one thing the mayor has going for him is that he's already raised about $4 million. He still has about $3 million on hand, according to the most recent reports. So he does have a leg in this race. You cannot write him off. The last poll that the New York Times did with Siena at the end of October, approximately 42% of Black voters were still approving of the job that he was doing. So it's
And
not
he's a
over for him
and
yet.
he's a and he's a and he's a dynamite campaigner. He loves retail
He's
politicking. You can't
Yes,
take that from him. He
he's a savvy
enjoys it
politician.
thoroughly and he does it well.
He's a savvy politician for sure. That's one thing, regardless of what you think of Mayor Adams or how he's run the city. He certainly is a savvy politician, and we saw that in the last mayor's race. Right, there was a point where people thought the race might be about the recovery from the pandemic, and it quickly became about crime. And he honed the message based on his background, his history growing up in the city, his background as a police officer, as someone who called out police abuse, and it was a winning message. So politically savvy for sure. It would be foolish for anyone to write him off at this point, even though he is damaged and still has a lot to figure out before we get to this June primary, including a potential trial.
Jeff, what are you working on? What's to come?
Well, I think where this race is really starting to heat up, the race for mayor. And I think the question is, how are these candidates going to distinguish themselves? How is someone like a Zelno Myrie going to figure out how to, get his name recognition out of the doldrums? How is someone like a Brad Lander, who's, the controller and, is putting forth policy ideas? How is he going to get the diverse support he needs? He's known as a more left-leaning politician, certainly probably has support in certain areas of the city, in Brownstone, Brooklyn, for example. But, traditionally, that's not enough to win. You mentioned Jessica Ramos. She's having trouble raising money. She has, $30,000 on hand. You can't run for mayor without money. And then you have other candidates like Mamdani, who really had a phenomenal fundraising period, but is very far to the left. And, given the political mood of the city, you wonder how he will navigate some of his far left positions with some of the everyday basic concerns that New Yorkers have about crime and affordability. So I think, the race is starting to form, is starting to shape up. It's going to be a weird race. We've never had a mayor facing a federal corruption trial. He's scheduled to go to trial in April while running for re-election, while trying to run the biggest and most complex, one of the most biggest complex cities in the world. So people should strap up and get ready.
Jeff, I pretty much talk to everyone across the board, like yourself, from reporters to electeds to consultants to this to that, and I find it telling that you've mentioned Senator Myrie several times in our conversation, and apparently you're impressed by him and the way his policy positions and his ideas. And is that the case? And it's fair because I've talked to a lot of people have been impressed by Zoran. Whether they think he can win or not doesn't
Right.
matter. Just how creative he's been in terms of his videos and the plunge and polar bear plunge and
Right.
some of the other things he's put forth in terms of messaging and ideas and populist messaging. I take it you've been impressed with Senator Myrie.
Yeah, look, I think he's an interesting candidate. He's young. He's about 38 years old. He has some legislative accomplishments. And I think, if you're a resident of New York City, that's the type of candidate you want. Someone who has been working for the city, who has a lot of ideas. I don't think I favor him or
No,
more than other
but
candidates. I think,
I know, but
yeah,
we're all we all. It's okay to say someone has, has been stood out in terms of
Yeah, I think
their
he's an
platform.
interesting case. I think he's an interesting case, right? For, how difficult it is to break through electorally in the city. You have the difficulty of raising money, which he's actually done well at that. And then you also have this whole idea of how do you translate that message to people? You may have great ideas, you may have good policies, but how do you break through that message and deal with the complex racial, ethnic politics in the city? Now you have to deal with ranked choice voting. You have to figure out a strategy around that. How do you deal with the mood of the electorate? Certainly, New York City is a city that's affected by a lot of these issues going on in DC nationally. So how do you manage all of that and pull a candidate out of there? I think that's what's really interesting. And Mamdani too. I think he has been very aggressive so far in this race, and he's done a lot to get himself attention. Again, there's concerns that, hey, is he too far left? They're gonna have to take that to the voters and see. It's just unpredictable at this point, I think. So it's going to be exciting to see how this actually gets worked out.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this weekly recap. There was plenty on your plate, so I appreciate you peeling away and giving me the opportunity to talk to you and catch up, simply because you have a lot to talk about and write about these days, my friend, which is good. It keeps you working, and it keeps us all in business to some extent. Anything you want to add, Jeff, to the conversation that I may not have asked you that you want to weigh in on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I appreciate this chance to talk about these issues. Just want the voters to sort of be able to listen to this coverage and make, help them make decisions. So I think that's a great thing about what you're doing, and what I'm trying to do, as well as the rest of my colleagues in the media. We want to provide information to help people make what is really going to be a consequential choice this next election.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully this won't be the last time. As things continue to heat up, we'll have a follow up conversations, because I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the comings and goings throughout this election season.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jeff.